Thank you, Rachel. Yes, and welcome everyone here today. As Rachel mentioned, I'm a registered surveyor and I work at Registered Surveyors in the CBD at Sydney. I graduated from Newcastle University in 2006 and I became registered the year I joined Reigate in 2013. And I'm still here these days as a registered surveyor and director. So I'd also like to thank the emerging surveyors for giving me the opportunity to present today. I think everything the emerging surveyors have done since they've come back has been fantastic. So congratulations to the guys and girls on the committee there. And once again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present. So I'm not sure how many people here today are familiar with the Seaforth case. I've presented it at a few group meetings. Today, I've tried to change up my presentation a little bit to make it a little bit more educational for the younger people in the audience, but I hope everyone gets something out of it. And the way I'd like to structure the talk is there's quite a lot of content in this, so I'd like to get to the end of the presentation before taking any questions. So if you do have questions, feel free to shoot them through to Rachel and I'll try and address them at the end of the presentation. So let's get started. So a little bit about the content today. First of all, I want to talk about my involvement as Reigate or my company's involvement, a brief outline of the chain of events of what happened at Seaforth. We'll talk a little bit about the original survey, the technical side of what happened. We'll have a brief look into the court case, and we'll also look at how the problem could have potentially been avoided. We'll also have a little bit of a look at the survey ethics that were ignored, the outcomes from the court case, and what we'd like to see in the future in relation to changes. And as mentioned, we'll try and get some time in for questions at the end. So at its core, I guess the Seaforth case is a prime example of an unregistered surveyor undertaking a land survey that resulted in significant damages to the public. For this reason, the institution and its members are very interested and passionate about it. We're trying to use it to drive change in legislation and the way that we operate as well, and building awareness to people in the public and the surveying profession. There's a lot of key learnings from the case that people can get from the case. And some of those learnings are in relation to how other professionals dealt with what happened in court and also what's happened after court. So in a nutshell, this is what the 6 maps looks like now in the street in Seaforth. You can see here this land here is owned by the Waldings. The land to the south is owned by a family called the Loos. And this garage here, which I've labelled most expensive garage in New South Wales, is on what is Clontarf Street council-owned public road. And the Seaforth case is a story about how that actually came about. So as mentioned, some of the main characters that we need to look at are the Waldings. They are the landowners adjacent to the road where the garage was built. There's not too much more you need to know about them apart from, I guess they're from the UK originally. They've come out maybe 6 or 7 years ago. They're professional people, but they're certainly not on top of everything land development in New South Wales or dealing with councils. So they were very much dependent on the professionals that they were engaging when they set about building and having this garage approved through council. There's the Loos to the south we talked about before. Not too much you need to know about them, apart from the fact that they were armed with an identification survey of their property from when they purchased it in I think the 1990s, mid-1990s, and this identification survey did correctly identify the road widening. And it's probably important at this case to mention that this part of Clontarf Street has been affected by a road widening, which was to be a bus stop. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Northern Beaches Council is a very important character in the case. Obviously, they were involved in approving the development, and they were involved in the court case in an observing capacity, and some big changes happened to their regulations after the court case. The other important character is Unregistered Surveyor DF. I'm going to refer to him as Unregistered Surveyor DF purely because that is the name that is on the detailed survey that was annexed to the DA that he undertook. I'd also like to take this opportunity to say that I don't know Surveyor DF, and this certainly isn't an exercise to try and throw him under the bus or attack his character. The purpose of presenting this case, both in the group meetings and today, is to hopefully educate people so that something like this never happens again to a member of the public and also to the surveying profession. Or we can at least move forward and get some good systems in place to make sure that it doesn't happen. So there's one other thing as well, and that is it's important to note that Unregistered Surveyor DF is, I believe, an acquaintance of the Waldings. So the survey was undertaken for cash, and there was a relationship there, although maybe not a strong one. They were known to each other. So in my involvement started back in December 2018, when Reigate were engaged to undertake an identification survey of a recently constructed garage in Seaforth. The phone call came from a lawyer that we've done work for quite a few years, and it wasn't out of the ordinary when he told me that there was a garage that was built on the street. I thought he might have been talking about 50 or 100 millimetres on the street, but when we got out there, we soon found out that that wasn't the case at all. So later that month, it was established that the garage, after we'd done our search, we'd gone out and undertaken the field measurements, we established that the garage was built wholly on Clontarf Street, which is council-owned public road. We were later engaged to provide a professional witness report for the court case, and then much later in 2023, Reigate was engaged to prepare a road closure plan for the Waldings after the court case. So we sort of flipped sides there, and we were then working for the Waldings, not the legal team representing the Loos. So we had to do our due diligence and make sure that that wasn't a conflict of interest. And the lawyers that we were working for previously said, that's fine, the court case is all finished. You can go ahead and prepare that plan. So this is a picture of the street. You can see the garage that was built. This was when we first undertook that ident survey in December 2018, I believe. You can see it's a fairly substantial structure. It's not just a concrete block garage, but there's also a space on the roof that was to be used for entertainment, potentially a breakdancing pad or something, I'm not sure. But it's, as you can see, a big structure, and the Loos were quite worried that that people on the roof would be able to see directly into their front yard, and it could be a potential invasion of their privacy. So in mid-2016, the Waldings decided to begin the process of building a garage at the front of their property. So this is the chain of events, and this is the chain of events which are outlined in the judge's findings of the court case, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. In October of 2016, Surveyor DF produced a partial detail survey detail and level survey of the front portion of the property for the purpose of annexure to a development application. December 2016, the DA was lodged with Northern Beaches Council. In May 2017, development consent was determined. In June 2018, Surveyor DF returned to site to place marks relative to boundaries before construction commenced, which construction commenced in September 2018. In October 2018, the Loos returned from holidays to see the development, and they immediately contacted Northern Beaches Council with their concerns. December 2018, Northern Beaches Council advised the Wallings that the development consent is valid until it's declared invalid by a relevant court, and that the works undertaken are consistent with the approved development application. Later that month, Lou's legal team engaged Reigate to undertake an identification survey of the partially constructed garage. And in February the next year, 2019, proceedings commenced between the parties' legal teams. And we'll talk a little bit about the court case that came from that later. That is a screenshot from the identification survey that we did in 2018. As you can see there, the concrete block garage under construction, however, very much finished, at least in a structural sense, is standing wholly on Clontarf Street, being between 75 millimetres and 80 millimetres clear of the Wallings front boundary. So we're going to talk now a little bit about the original survey that was annexed to the development application. So this original survey is obviously what was used for the approval, but also what was used for the design of the garage. And we'll firstly have a brief look into the notes that are on the survey. A few important notes here. The first one being no boundary survey has been undertaken. Bearings and dimensions are from title only and are subject to confirmation by boundary survey. This is a fairly standard note, as I'm sure a lot of people listening in today are aware. However, the interesting thing comes in the court case when the judge does give, or at least comments on that note, as well as the third note down, dimensions and areas shown are approximate only and are subject to confirmation by boundary survey. This is a zoom in on the front of the survey plan. Actually, one thing that I'd like to mention before I talk about that zoom in, you'll see from the overall shot here that the rear of the property has not been surveyed at all. It's very much a partial survey, concentrating on the front portion of the title and Clontarf Street. There's been no information measured at the rear of the property there. You'll also see at on this zoom in at the front that where the front boundary has been defined, there's not really any occupations in the vicinity of the front boundary. The only occupation really that's shown is this retaining wall here. But we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get further into the talk. That wall that I just mentioned is this wall here. So I want to move on now to talk a little bit about the technical side of the road widening, how it came about. It was in 1957. You can see part of lots 178 to 183 in DP 11162 were dedicated to council for the purpose of road widening. So that's part 178 here, all the way through to part 183 here. This is what the CRE looked like or sorry, this is what the CRE looks like today. However, in 2016, when the survey was undertaken for the purpose of the DA, the DCDB and the CRE looked very, very much different, and we'll talk about that a little bit coming up. So the road widening that was dedicated by memorandum of dedication by dealing G628386, part of the road widening that was dedicated by memorandum dedication by dealing G628386, which is part of cancelled certificate of title vol as shown on the screen, shows the part lots 180 and 181 in DP 11162 shaded pink and noted as dedicated as highway on this following slide here. So that's the original, or the vol title that was in existence in the mid-1950s. So on the 30th of September 1960, a new vol title came out when the aforementioned one was cancelled, and that new title was volume 8002, folio 186. The figure on the following slide shows the diagram contained in that vol title, with Clontarf Street widened via the aforementioned memorandum of dedication, and new lot dimensions were given to part lot 180, which are the dimensions after the road widening, which you can see here. So 180 used to be 140 feet. It's now 120. So then we'll skip forward quite a few years until 1989, when certificate of title vol that we mentioned previously was cancelled. A new CT was created under the integrated titling system at LPI in the day, and this new identifier was lot 1 in DP 119074, which is a departmental plan that shows Clontarf Street, the new lot with the new lot dimensions after the road widening. So a couple of things to note here is the plan heading of this departmental plan, which is a plan of part of lot 180 in DP 11162. The other is this sketch is a little bit dodgy. Where I've drawn that red line is probably closer to scale in relation to how the street, the front boundary of the street is, and there's no width shown on Clontarf Street, but it's a departmental plan, so there's that as well. We're going to have a little bit of a look at the titles now, and that's a quite important part of the case. So this is the current title for the Waldings. You can see here the follow identifier being lot 1 in DP 119074. And the important thing to note here in the second schedule of the title is that the road widening does not appear as affecting the title, and that's because the new folio identifier doesn't contain the road widening. The road widening has already been subtracted from the lot, so the new title that was created in 1989 is not affected by the road widening. However, next door, this is the Lewes title, and LRS or LPI back in the day dealt with this one a little bit differently, and that is that they kept the same folio identifier being lot 179 in DP 11162. However, added in the second schedule of the title that land excludes the roads shown in plan excludes the roads shown in with plan G620017, the memorandum of the road widening. I'm not sure why this happened, why LRS or LPI of the day decided to tackle these in different methods, but that's very important to be aware of. I wanted to do a quick detour now and just talk briefly about the importance of these old Volfold titles and how easy they are to obtain these days. And they're free. So these old Volfold titles can be found on the LRS's Historical Lands Records Viewer. As you can see here, we just put in the Volfold number in the keywords, and it'll come up down here as an old form torrents register, and you can view that file for free. You can see here, this is a zoom in on that particular title, and we can also, if that particular Volfold doesn't go back far enough, you can see the reference to the previous Volfolds up on the top left of the document, where you can go back further if you want to search those ones. I wanted to talk briefly about the court case now. So the court case happened in started in 2020. I think the ruling came out in 2021. A couple of very important things to mention before we get into the court case. And I guess the first thing that I'd like to mention is that I'm by no means a legal expert. I'm looking at this purely as from the perspective of a registered surveyor and looking at the surveying aspects of the judge's findings. I'm purely no legal expert. However, all of this information is available to the public. This is a public document. If you want to go through and read the 82 pages or however many it is, feel free to do that. It's online. It's very important to understand what the case is about. And at its core, the Lew's legal team went out to prove that landowners' consent was not properly obtained. This is obviously because the garage was built on council-owned public land. However, the DA was signed by the landowners, being the Waldings. So although the court case wasn't about the original survey as such, the judge makes some very interesting comments on it. Another very important fact is that Northern Beaches Council attended court in an observing capacity. So the court case was Lew versus Walding. So the Northern Beaches Council weren't being sued, but they did attend court in an observing capacity. So let's move on to some of the judge's findings in the court case. This one's a little bit confusing. This is item 53 of the judge's findings, where he says the DF survey plan lodged with the DA stated expressly that it did not indicate the boundaries of the Walding property. The notation states that bearings and dimensions are from title only and are subject to confirmation by a boundary survey. It identifies being the same figure as the deposited plan dimensions. The side boundary length of the Walding's northern and southern boundaries is 36.575. Wherever 36.575 is measured from the rear boundary would be the correct front boundary. It's a little bit confusing. The survey indicates a line purporting to represent a front boundary on the assumption the rear boundary is generally accurately located in the survey. If 36.575 metres is measured accurately, the Walding's land cannot include the approximately 4.5 metres of dedicated land. The marked front boundary line has apparently been interpreted as showing the front boundary, but includes the dedicated land. It is difficult to understand what the survey purports to show at the front of the Walding's property, given these inconsistencies. One of the interesting facts in the case is the judge's reference to what he calls 6 maps. And this is a fairly classic item that he says a 6 maps plan was lodged with the DA in the SEE. Such a plan is not required by the EPA regulation. another version also appears in the council's delegated authority report. This incorrectly depicts the location of the Waldings front boundary as incorporating the dedicated land. The 6 maps extract in evidence annexed to the affidavit of Mrs. Walding contains a written caveat that LPI does not warrant or represent that the information is free from errors or omissions, or that it is exhaustive. LPI gives no warranty in relation to the information, especially material supplied by third parties. And as mentioned at the start of the talk, the DCDB did look a lot different in 2016, 2017 when the documents for the DA were prepared. You can see there that the boundary in red does not show the road widening. In my opinion, the most interesting item in the judge's findings is item 253, and that's where the judge basically rejects the survey that was put forth for the development application. And he says, no boundary survey or site plan was prepared for the Waldings DA, despite the requirement in Schedule 1, Part 1, Clause 2(1)(a) and 2 of the EPA regulation, with the result that their front boundary was not identified correctly at the time of the time their DA was submitted. So he basically just rejects the plan and says that it wasn't done in accordance with the EPA regulation. All the plans lodged in support of the Waldings DA show their front boundary in the wrong location. The perils of relying on 6 maps to identify legal property boundaries, as the Waldings and Council's assessing officers did, are well and truly highlighted by these events. While the respondents submitted that 6 maps is published by the New South Wales Government for the use by public to identify boundaries of land on aerial photos, that is clearly not correct for all purposes. Use of 6 maps does not necessarily comply with the EPA Act and EPA regulation concerning the identification of property boundaries. Some very interesting comments there, in my opinion, on 6 maps boundaries or DCDB boundaries by the judge. Some other interesting facts about the judge's findings. The judge mentions the word 6 maps in his findings 30 times. The judge only mentions the word registered surveyor once, and this is in relation to my expert witness report. However, the judge loses points because he gets my name wrong, where he says the affidavit of Mr. Alexander Brown, Director of Rygates. Alexander is my middle name, so he didn't do his proper checks there. But it's a very interesting statistic, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So the outcomes of the court case were such that the judge determined that the demolition of the garage was not warranted. So the Waldings got to keep their garage. The judge found that the construction of the garage was a breach of the EPA Act, as proper landowner's consent was not obtained. And the Waldings were ordered to pay costs in relation to the compensating the lose, as well as court costs. So now we're going to have a quick look at how the problem could have potentially been avoided. So also with the outcomes, the Waldings had to formalise the encroachment on the street, which was done by means of a road closure plan. This is page 1 of the road closure plan that we prepared. There's not too much that I want to talk about on this slide. The fix of Clontarf Street was not overly difficult. We found a GI pipe here and some connections from previous plans into the intersection of Alto and Clontarf Street. I think we had maybe a 20 or 30 millimetre excess, which we distributed, and page 2 supports that with occupations. But certainly we weren't winning an Essie award for the definition of Clontarf Street. It was a fairly straightforward process. It's not known how unregistered surveyor DF fixed the front boundary of Clontarf Street. It's possible that occupations were used either side of the road widening, and he's come across PO distances along a line across the front, but I'm not aware of how it was done. The very real way, in my opinion, that the problem could have been avoided is if any weight was given to occupations in the street, or particularly on the subject land of which the survey that the DA was undertaken. You'll see here, as I mentioned before, along where the front boundary has been defined, there's no occupations at all. For some reason, the plan shows a grassed area and a garden area, but there's no physical separation on site between those two. It's just the way the plan's drawn. The only occupation, as we mentioned previously, is this retaining wall back here, and the only occupation that the other occupation that he could have used in support of this east-west boundary is obviously the one at the rear of the property, which he's failed to measure at all. If he had have measured that, he would have soon found out that the boundary, or the boundary as he had it defined, would be six metres in error of that particular fence at the rear of the property. So with the true fix of the boundary, this fence is fairly close to the boundary, and these occupations here, the wall is also very, very close to the title boundary at the front. So I wanted to just talk briefly about some general principles of boundary definition. This is a screenshot from the Registrar General's guidelines. However, the information out of it has really been extracted from Hallman and also survey investigation notes by R.W. Willis. Also, a bit of a plug here for the institution. For people who aren't members, you should sign up, because Hallman is free to members. So if you're not a member, sign up. There's some really good stuff in there. But what I wanted to talk about today was the hierarchy of survey evidence, which registered surveyors use in relation to defining boundaries. And I guess as registered surveyors, we're really investigators, and it's very important to do all your research before you make important decisions. And I think in this case, the surveyor that undertook the original detail survey really didn't have any of these evidences to support his fix, which is why the problem was, which is how the problem came about in the first place. There's certainly no monuments or occupations that he used to support. There was no original marks. So yeah, there was more investigation needed to be undertaken. Another way that the problem could have been avoided, in my opinion, would be to order the reference map. These reference maps are also available free online on LRS portal. So do we order one of these for every detail survey? Probably not, but if there is potential problems and you're having to do further investigations, absolutely. It's a free document, and in this case, the reference map does show the road widening, so it would have put things to bed pretty early. Now I want to talk briefly about the survey ethics that were ignored in the case. So this is a screenshot of the title block on the original DA survey. You'll notice a few things on the title block, and that is there's certainly no company name on the title block. There's also no registered surveyors logo or name on the, no company logo or name or registered surveyor's name on the title block. The other concerning thing on the title block is this down here where it says job number 62. Hopefully there's not another 61 of these jobs floating around somewhere in the public domain. But so Surveyor DF acted unethically by representing himself as someone with appropriate qualifications to undertake a land survey showing boundaries. The survey was undertaken as a weekend cash job using DF's employer's equipment, which is also quite unethical. And just while I'm talking about that, for the young people in the audience, just don't do it. It's really not worth it. You can see what can happen when you look at a job like this. If you do need to do a job for a family member or friend, just have a word to your bosses. Here at Reigate, we're willing to accommodate that. We'll put it through our books. You can do it in your time. We'll supervise it. We'll get it done properly through the books. But you can't do this because this is it doesn't end up well for anyone, as you'll see in this. So I want to briefly look now at the outcomes. We talked about the characters in the case at the start. So I want to now quickly have a look at what's changed. What are the outcomes to those characters involved? So the first one, Northern Beaches Council. As mentioned, they attended court in an observing capacity. So they face no damages. However, the judge's findings below gave Northern Beaches Council a big shake-up. This is the judge's finding item 253, which I mentioned when we looked at the court case. The areas highlighted in yellow are what's quite damning to Northern Beaches Council, in my opinion, where they've rejected the survey, and also the judges talked about how council should not be using the six maps boundaries to identify property boundaries. As I mentioned at the start, Northern Beaches Council, on the start of this slide, Northern Beaches Council faced no damages. If anything, they actually made money from it at the end when the Waldings were forced to purchase the land, as well as going through the whole road closure process. So they weren't adversely affected, but they certainly have made some changes, which we're going to talk about now. So the Northern Beaches Council went from accepting a survey plan with no company name, notes stating no boundary survey was undertaken, no signature of a registered surveyor back in 2016 when they accepted the survey plan that we've been looking at, to today, where it's very different. So this is a press release that came out in December 2019 when council started doing their research before the court case. And you'll see a very important item down the bottom that I've bordered in blue that says, in other changes, so this is from Council CEO Ray Brownlee. He says, in other changes, a boundary identification survey will need to be submitted to ensure accurate assessment and identification of property boundaries. It's very important when assessing a development application that we have absolute clarity on property boundaries. Boundary identification surveys provided by registered surveyors enable this. Another interesting document, which is on the Northern Beaches Council website, which is a simple guide to residential development, where this document explains how to lodge a DA. You'll see highlighted down in yellow, item 1 of how to lodge a DA is now engage a registered surveyor to do a boundary identification survey of your land. The survey will detail the property boundary features of the site including existing boundaries and relative levels of the land. So quite a huge change from 2016 to now with Northern Beaches Council. That's just a brief explanation of what Northern Beaches Council talk about in relation to a boundary identification survey. The features of a site, including existing buildings and relative levels. This will need to be done by a registered surveyor. And I'm sure the people online here today who do work in the Northern Beaches are now aware that, Northern Beaches Council are very strict on what they accept as a detailed survey to be annexed to a development application. They won't take anything that's not signed by a registered surveyor, and they also will knock back plans that have notes on them talking about no boundary survey has been undertaken. The next character that I want to talk about in this particular slide is the Waldings. I'd probably also like to say at this point of the talk, I've been in the surveying industry for about 20 years, and I don't know if there's any case that's really sort of affected me the way this one did. It's a very heartbreaking case for the Waldings. They relied on experts, and they were heavily let down by not just the experts that they engaged, but possibly their local council as well, and also their legal counsel. So as a result of the case, the cost of the road closure and the compensation paid to the Lewes, the Waldings are out of pocket over $900,000. It's probably a little bit more than that, actually. To be honest, that was before the road closure was registered, so there's probably some additional costs there. But it's a horrendous outcome for the Waldings, and it's pretty heartbreaking. And it's not just a financial penalty for the Waldings. They've also, the relationship with their neighbours has been destroyed. Alex's husband has an AVO out on him by his neighbours, so it's just a terrible situation for them. The Waldings are financially exhausted after the court case, and they're not in a position to pursue further legal action. And not only are they financially exhausted, but they're also just purely exhausted. They don't want to be around courts anymore. They just want to move on with the next stage of their life. So back last year, myself, Mitch Hanlon, Adrian Barden, and Rachel Greenwood had a Zoom meeting with Alexandra Walding, where we talked about the case, and we wanted to see if there was any way that we could help her and her family. It was a very interesting talk. One of the things that was very interesting about the talk was that Alex was completely unaware that Surveyor DF was not registered and not qualified to undertake the works that he did. And it's also very interesting that the initial lawyers that we did work for did not look into this either. They didn't realise that Surveyor DF was unregistered, and to be honest, they didn't look into it. So looking into that as a surveyor, it's quite shocking. But as mentioned at the start, there's quite a lot of key learnings in this case, and one I think is definitely being educated on how other professions look at our profession and what we need to do to be more professional. So Alex and her family decided against pursuing legal action against Surveyor DF for three reasons. One, as mentioned, they're financially exhausted. Two, she felt a moral obligation not to. As mentioned, that they were acquaintances before the survey was undertaken. And three, Surveyor DF likely had no insurance anyway. Clearly, it was not undertaken under the insurance of a surveying company. So it could be that even if she did have a successful claim against him, she wouldn't get any money out of it anyway. We're going to move on to the next character now. and that is Surveyor DF. So how did he fare from things? Surveyor DF profited by cash in hand for the works, being the original detail and the boundary set out. Surveyor DF was reported to Bossy on recommendation of the ISNSW Surveying Practice and Legislation Committee, and after quite a few months, he received a warning letter from Bossy. So no financial penalties, but he did receive a warning letter. So what do we want to come out of this case? So as Rachel mentioned at the start, Mitch Hanlon is very, very passionate about this case. He's the president of the institution. Scott Murray, who's the chair of the Survey Practice and Legislation Committee, is also quite passionate about using this case to drive change. Some of the things that we want to use this case to drive change in is ethics. Ethics is now taught as a presentation in the ISNSW candidate workshops. I believe Bob Harrison presents that. But we're also looking at getting into universities and TAFE to see if we can present on survey ethics in those forums as well. ISNSW hopes that this case can be used to educate other professionals and local councils about the importance of using a registered surveyor and the dangers of relying on DCDB boundaries. And some of these professionals may be legal professionals, architects, engineers, and builders. An interesting fact, Rob Monteith on the institution board currently had a look through all of the local councils in New South Wales and found that approximately 40% of local councils in the state state that DAs, surveys annexed to DAs must be signed by a registered surveyor. So we've still got quite a bit of work to do in that regard. We'd like to get that percentage much higher. And it's also one thing to have a council say that they require it. It's another thing for them to be enforcing it. One thing that I'd like to quickly talk about is the document, What is a Land Survey, the Bossy document on their website. I think it's quite important for other professionals to understand what is a land survey, as well as the surveyors themselves. So I'm not going to show the whole of the document. However, a couple of important factors that they talk about is any land, well, the identification of land boundaries means that the boundary is identified by, for example, bearings and distances or offsets from structures or improvements such as fencing. If you undertake a survey and prepare a plan that identifies land boundaries, that part of the survey and plan is a land survey. So there's clearly no doubt that the survey that was prepared in 2016 was a land survey, and in Bossy's eyes should have been undertaken by a registered surveyor. We'd also like to see Bossy have a little bit more power to prosecute unregistered surveyors. As mentioned, in this case, it was outside the 6 months, so they really weren't able to do much. So currently Bossy are restricted by Section 179 of the Criminal Procedures Act, 1986. This is the act that restricts Bossy to taking action only if the unregistered land survey is within 6 months of the date undertaken. I've got in brackets, seriously, how often is a land survey discovered within 6 months? In this case, I think the DA was in council for 6 months, so the chances of anyone finding it within that 6 month period would be very, very slim. And that certainly needs to be addressed. So ISNSW have formed a surveying legislation working group. Melanie Gibbons is on board to help us with that. Melanie Gibbons is an ex-MP with some good contacts. The more cases we have as examples, the better for driving this change. So if you have any examples of unregistered surveyors undertaking land surveys that have resulted in problems, please email them through to the institution. And obviously, if the survey is within 6 months, you should be reporting it to Bossy, and also possibly reporting it to Bossy anyway, just so that they can be made aware of what's happening. And I think that is the end of my presentation. So we've got about 8 minutes for questions. If there's any questions that have come through, I'm more than happy to have a crack at answering them.
Mick, I've got 2 questions.
Sure.
The first is in regards to that road widening. Would that have been picked up? You mentioned in a town map. Can that be picked up in the HLRV on the charting map?
Yes, it was on the charting map, just not in the
Yep.
DCDB.
Yeah, Rog. Okay. So obviously Surveyor DF didn't go that far.
No. But as mentioned, yeah, the titling thing is something that's quite interesting. It does make sense. However, it is also fairly common for surveyors to just say, "Oh, the road widening wasn't shown on the title," which in this case there's a reason for it not being shown on the title. But yeah, that's where the additional research was needed in this case.
And the CRE at the time, there was a pretty obvious shape showing the road widening, wasn't there?
No, the CRE didn't show the road widening. Yeah. So yes, as I'm sure a lot of people are aware, that the CRE is can be unreliable at times. So no, it did not show the road widening at the time. It was obviously has been corrected now, but for some reason it wasn't shown at the time.
Sure. And you mentioned that the notes for was it Northern Beaches Council? They no longer accept notes on a detailed survey saying that no boundary survey has been undertaken, blah blah blah. Which we have on our plans for detailed surveys, and I assume most surveyors do. Do you recommend a different sort of notes, kind of moving forward to that now, or what do you guys do?
It's a good question. We don't do an awful lot of work in Northern Beaches Council. When we do, we make sure that we do a thorough boundary survey on a DA. It'd be interesting to talk to someone from CMS who does work there all the time. It's an interesting case because surveyors want this change. They want to be signing plans and that sort of thing, but it can be a little bit of an issue, particularly with limited title stuff. Northern Beaches Council want that notation taken off the plan, but obviously if there is plans or titles that are limited title, we want to put notes on there. So we're trying to liaise with Northern Beaches Council at the moment and get a direct way forward.
Sure. So for councils that don't have this strict specification, do you still put on, for a detailed survey, you're not going to the extent of essentially doing a surround survey?
We have a note that talks about if structures are to be set out, an additional boundary survey will need to be undertaken. We certainly don't have a note these days that says no boundary survey has been undertaken.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's probably as close as I can get to answering that question. I think it's more we're doing set out in relation to boundaries.
Yeah. Thanks, Mick.
Thanks.
We've got a question in the chat from Magnus. How frequently have you encountered councils and lay people relying on 6 maps for boundary information?
Sorry, Rachel, can you say that again?
Yeah, sure. How frequently have you encountered councils and lay people relying on 6 maps for boundary information?
Oh, every day. Well, particularly other professions and everyday people. I'd like to think councils didn't do it as much. But yes, we're forever hearing stories about other professions using 6 maps, the coordinates of boundaries where they've clicked on a boundary and taken it as gospel. So it's something that other professions need to be educated on. And that's why I thought that item 253 of the judge's findings was quite interesting and could potentially be used to educate other professions as well. Because I think in today's day and age, when people see something represented and they can click on it and it's shown to an accurate, well, if you order the DXF, it's to the millimeter, and a lot of people don't understand that's not the case. So yes, it's a common occurrence and something that I think that we need to tackle as a profession.
Thank you. Any other questions? Feel free to take yourself off mute and ask them or pop them in the chat.
Hey Mick, my name's Damien. Has the Institute or yourself got any idea around how to, like, I don't know, whether the majority of people within this webinar are registered surveyors or people that are higher end in their knowledge base in surveying, but getting it back to these people that are doing the surveys who aren't registered or don't have the skills to do the boundary? Is there any way of getting that information, or whether that's the Institute or Bossy trying to, obviously there's no, looking at this case, this DF surveyors had no consequences at the end of it. Has there been discussions from the Institute or Bossy as to how to get this information back to people that are actually undertaking these surveys?
It's a good question. It's a good question, Damien. Well, the way that I see it, I think we need to start very, very early in the piece. As mentioned, we want to get this ethics talk into TAFEs and universities so that surveyors are aware of what they're doing. The Emerging Surveyors group is also a good platform for that. I believe we're trying to encourage young technicians, young graduates to be a part of these talks, so that we can educate on this platform as well. But for me, I think that's where it has to start. It needs to start when people are learning about surveying. They need to learn at that stage that you know, this is how we undertake our works.
Yeah, and there's a lot of responsibilities put on the supervising surveyor as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Especially with the latest outcomes of the supervision requirements.
Yes, agreed. Yeah.
Lovely. If there's no further questions, was there anything else, Mick, that you wanted to touch on?
Sorry, it's Adrian here. Sorry, Mick. I was talking to Phil this morning, and he was talking about we're trying to push through with getting the TAFE-based technician surveyors, getting their technical qualifications registered with IS New South Wales, and providing additional, CPD resources that are relevant to the various types of things. But it's a whole body of work, and it has been looked at in the past, and it's quite complex because there's various technicians that have got very, very specific skills in very specialised type of thing that, as a registered surveyor, I have no idea about some of the stuff that, and look, I can't put it in better language, but some of these TAFE guys would kick my ass, and so we really do want to bring all of our surveyors, whether registered or unregistered, along for this ride, this journey. I think there's important lessons there, but predominantly it's about that continuing professional training, that continuing professional practice, getting this training thing out. Unfortunately, and I'm guilty as much as other registered surveyors in other firms. The training often we go there compulsory, attend it compulsory, but a lot of our guys don't. And so to get those, I think this is a great thing that you guys are doing with emerging surveyors and providing this training to younger surveyors. So highly commend that and congratulate the board for putting that together. Yeah, and particularly this emerging surveyors group. Yeah, over to you guys again.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Adrian.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. I think that's a really good point. As you said, it's very hard to get that up and running, but I personally would like to see that an accreditation for technicians. I think that would solve a lot of problems.
Absolutely. There's one other question that I've got here, if we've got time. Is IS preparing documentation for recommended practice regarding detailed surveys? I've seen plans with wall to boundary offsets and then disclaimers that no boundary identification has been undertaken.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, look, I don't think I'll answer that off my own bat. I'm happy to take it up to the SPNL committee and talk about it on the directors forum, but yeah, we can get back to you on that, mate. I think.
Any other questions? I'm mindful that we've reached 4 o'clock, but thank you everybody for taking the time to join us today. I hope you found that informative, and it's a lot to process, but hopefully some nuggets in there. And yes, we don't have another emerging surveyors webinar scheduled just yet, so keep an eye out for the next one, and we'll all be in touch. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Mick.